My neighbor claims that we have a coy wolf in our neighborhood. Is there such a thing?
So the question is, do we have coy wolves here, right? That was unfortunately, one of the documentaries we were involved in. So a coy wolf refers to a hybrid between a coyote and a wolf, and it is true that the two species can interbreed and produce hybrids, just like they can with coyotes and dogs, because dogs are wolves. They have the same number of chromosomes, and genetically they're pretty similar. That's completely overblown. What we found is that as coyotes moved eastward, especially over the Great Lakes, the early dispersers interbred with wolves many decades ago, and that history of that interbreeding then filtered out to coyotes as they moved out farther east. And so most eastern coyotes have a very small amount of wolf DNA. So the term coy wolf is completely misleading because it implies it's a 50-50 thing. It's in actuality, and we, by the way, we hate that word. That it's totally misleading, and people get the wrong idea. So they see what they think is a large animal, and think that has to be a coy wolf. No, all of our coyotes are the same. Our coyotes here in Illinois have about a less than 1% amount of DNA that's wolf-related, less than 1%. And depending on where you're at, in some cases they may have 2 to 3% of dog DNA. But they're over roughly 97% pure coyote. And that little tiny percentage, you would never be able to pick that out. So there's no real difference between our coyotes here and on the other side of the Mississippi. So they're just differences in size, like any other wild animal. Yep.
I was surprised to see that when you were handling the kits or the litters, that you were handling them with bare hands, and I assume you put them back into the dens, and there was not any issues as far as the smell of human odor or?
Right, so the question is, when we are going into the dens and handling those pups, we're not wearing gloves, we're just using bare hands.
Right.
And so the question is, does our human scent influence any of that? And what we found, and we only did this after other people have done this prior to us, and so we're following their guidelines, especially wolves. The scientists go into wolf dens all the time. What they found is that human scent doesn't affect the animals. First of all, the coyotes, they know you're there already, so you can't hide that. They know you're there. And so you're already disturbing the area. So your scent putting gloves on isn't going to help. So the other thing that, to our benefit, is that they are such strong parents. They have such a strong parenting instinct, is that they will not give up on that litter, no matter what. So they will come back, and we actually put cameras on in the early years. The first year we did that, we put a camera up to document and actually record, are they getting all of the pups out? So they will take the pups and they'll move them to another location. But that's naturally natural behavior. So coyotes often will have multiple dens, and at some point during that period, if something bothers them, if they get nervous about it, they'll take that litter and they'll move it to a different den. So they're already doing that. So this is just something that they would normally do anyway. And so we've never had pups abandoned. Coyotes don't do that. In fact, what we have had are coyotes adopt. So we've had five cases now of adoption of coyotes taking other members' pups and raising them as their own, even if they're different ages. Yeah.
Do the coyotes in the urban area eat rats as part of their rodent-based food? And if so, are they affected by rat poisons?
Right. So the question is, especially those downtown animals, are they eating rats? Because Chicago, I don't know if it's still 5 million, but at one point they estimated that the rat population was about 5 million down there. So that would be a natural prey, not natural, but a very abundant prey for them. What we found so far, and I didn't have rats on there, that's because it was hard for us to collect. Actually, rats are the hardest animals to trap out there. They're extremely difficult. They're harder than coyotes. But we eventually got our samples up, and we just simply haven't put it on the stable isotope slide. They're clear over on the human side as well, but they fall out in their own little polygon, which is nice. And what we found is that we have no coyotes really using the rats. And in fact, that also corresponds to the scat analysis that we've done, downtown. We don't find rats in their scat. And we've never observed, we followed these animals at night, watching them eating. We've never seen a coyote eat a rat. So that doesn't mean that there isn't the occasional animal that will do that. As you saw, there's a lot of variation. But with all those rats there, they don't take advantage of that, which is probably beneficial for them because you do have rodenticides out there. And for a while during our study, Chicago still had their rat poisoning program. And so we assumed that we were going to start losing animals because of that. A sister study to ours that was done and is in fact still going on in LA, out in Los Angeles, finds that rodenticide is like the second largest cause of death next to cars for their coyotes. So rodenticide is a really important mortality factor. We have yet to document a single coyote in our study dying from rodenticide. It just doesn't happen. So, yeah.
How is mange spread, and is there a risk that it's going to spread into other wildlife population and into pet population?
Right, so the question is, how is mange spread, and is there a risk of it being transmitted to other wildlife or even our pets and us? And so what I'm talking about, there's different forms of mange. What this is what we call sarcoptic mange. That's the deadly form, the really aggressive form of mange. It's a mite that burrows into their skin, so it's actually physical contact for the most part, that transmission. Or if they're in a den that they're spending a lot of time in, then you can have mites that you can get some indirect transmission that way. In most cases it's direct, which is important because what that means is that it's very rare for it to be transmitted to pets or people. Your pets can or at least your canids, your dogs can get it. Cats are pretty much immune. Most other species are immune to it. Squirrels are not, and foxes are not. Foxes actually are even more susceptible to it than coyotes. So humans can get it, but you have to have really poor hygiene and really close contact to a coyote to be able to get that. So it's not, it is technically what we call a zoonotic disease, which can be transmitted to humans, but I don't know of any human cases.
Is it
at all.
fatal to coyotes?
So the mange, the question is it fatal? What happens with mange is that it is ultimately. So what happens is that it definitely irritates their skin. They do a lot of scratching that it affects their immune system, and so they become more susceptible to other things that they would easily be able to withstand, like canine distemper. Like all of our coyotes are basically positive for distemper, so they rarely die from it, unless they have like mange, and then that can drop their immunity down. But what really kills them is winter weather. So the mange animals will be able to survive, kind of eke along, until you get hit with, like we got hit with a really cold Arctic blast in January, and that's when we have a lot of mortality. So it's the winter weather that's the proximate cause, but it's the mange that's the ultimate cause. Yep.
Even though pet dogs aren't primary food source, there's still always a risk that there can be confrontation with a pet animal. You got a backyard that's not fenced, coyotes walking through the backyard every morning at 6:30, maybe every time. Any recommendations on how to protect our pets without the obvious thing of leaving food outside?
Right, so the question is, if you have coyotes that are using or either using your backyard or using the area behind your yard, and you have dogs, is there any suggestions in terms of reducing the risk of coyotes attacking those dogs? And so basically food is one of the most important things. So food, and it's not just coyotes, it's pretty much wild animals in general. If you don't have food there, if you don't have an attractant, then they generally move on. They're mostly spending their time with that. But you're right, dogs sometimes can be the attractant, even beyond the food. And so the best thing is to make sure that you maintain your presence there, and if you see coyotes out there, shoo them off and make them aware that that's not a good area for them to use. You could also mark your territory.
I could mark.
So you can mark it. But,
You think about that.
yeah, you can do that. Or
Please.
in the dark, or if you have a significant other, you can have that. So So, but you can mark your territory in other ways, so you can actually just make your presence more obvious, so you can put old clothes out, or something that
Yeah.
disturbs them a little bit. Other people will use like a radio. If you put a radio out there and put it on some kind of talk radio at a low level, then you have to move it around, you have to turn it on and off, and that can also help repel them. But the main thing is just watch it, and if you have really small dogs, and if you have coyotes that you know are out there, especially when you let them out at night, you should keep an eye on them, basically. Yep. So, yep, sorry.
Yeah, I think we'll end on that fine note, and that recommendation, and you mentioned your webpage where you can probably find a lot more
Yep.
information. We have gone a little bit over. Our next meeting is on May 9th.